Hotline Miami is a top-down action game with heavy emphasis on gore and blood. The game was developed by Denton Games, a duo game development team with Jonathan Soderstrom and Dennis Whedon. Hotline Miami is a spiritual successor to the video game Super Carnage, which was a game made by Jonathan when he was 18. The game featured a drunk man in a bathroom grabbing weapons and fighting dogs and a bunch of thugs in one level. The game would repeat this over and over again and had no actual story or structure. It was just a tech demo for what would later become Hotline Miami. It featured a fixed camera and the famous door mechanics from the final game, minus the ability to knock down opponents using said door. Judging by the gameplay and style, it would be easy to assume the game was actually made in Flash, but was really made in Game Maker 5, a really old game engine made in 2003. Later on, when Hotline Miami is actually in development, they would later use a better engine called Game Maker Studio. The game was cancelled in 2003, and the only evidence we have of its existence is a tech demo and an interview with Devolver Digital, who would later go on to publish the final game. There was a lot of reasons that the Game Maker 5 engine simply wouldn't work. One of the biggest ones was pathfinding. The pathfinding engine in Game Maker 5 was actually so poor that they could not finish the game due to it. So Soderstrom decided to scrap the project. Now bear in mind, at this point, Soderstrom was completely independent. This was the only game he ever made from this point. A few years later, he would meet Whedon, who is the second developer of Denton Games. He was in a Swedish band, and they decided to collaborate together in order to make a game based around that band. And the game was indeed, well, I'll just show you. You know I don't get paid enough for this shit. The game that they made had been promoting Dennis Whedon's band, Fucking Werewolf Asso. From what I played, it felt like a WarioWare styled game about a man turning into a pink werewolf, with the game changing every time you went onto a new stage. Funnily enough, both this game and Super Carnage are considered abandonware, so there is absolutely no legal repercussions for downloading it for free. Unless you're a Nintendo fan, in that case, fuck you! Now, the game was relatively underground for the most part, with the only moments of it breaking out into the public limelight being when Jacksepticeye played the game a little bit on his YouTube channel. Now, likely when they were developing this game, they didn't take it too seriously. I mean, like, it's just a game that's basically promotion material for Dennis Whedon's band. But after this, they began development on a completely different game, Life Death Island, which actually looks a lot similar to a New Blood game, Faith. However, there was only footage of this, not even a zip file to a demo, and the game was unfortunately cancelled. After these games basically failing at the market, Soderstrom and Whedon decided to make an actual commercial game, so basically they're gonna actually put effort into this one. The reason, of course, being financial issues. And as they were looking for inspiration in order to make the game, Whedon had seen the demo of Soderstrom's game, Super Carnage, and decided to use that as inspiration. And that is when the development of Hotline Miami really began. Whedon, when shown footage of Super Carnage, said he instantly fell in love with it. When he was asked about it, he stated, "I love it, right from the start. I played his prototype for quite a while, even though it was just one level. And that was the most exciting part. Making a game that we love to play ourselves, we never really thought about what anyone else would think. We just wanted to play it, and to do that, we had to make it." In terms of the actual game itself, it actually takes a lot of inspirations from movies and shows of the time. Hotline Miami actually takes heavy inspiration from the Ryan Gosling movie Drive, citing it as the biggest inspiration for the game, which makes a lot of sense for a lot of reasons. Hotline Miami actually took so much inspiration from Drive that you can actually find the driver's jacket from the movie inside the game. If you actually watch the movie and then play the game, you will actually start to see all the similarities that they share between the two. For example, its minimalistic plot, its silent protagonist, even its music are heavily similar towards each other. However, despite sharing those similarities between the two, the silent protagonist trope actually came from Half-Life, specifically Gordon Freeman, who also, throughout the entirety of Half-Life, never speaks a single word. The Miami setting came from not Miami CSI, which a lot of people seem to think, but rather a relatively unknown documentary called Cocaine Cowboys, which was about the cocaine operations in Miami, Florida, which was a huge issue at the time. The animal mask idea actually came from the movie Kick-Ass. Basically, the idea was that this kid spent pretty much $10 on a green suit and wanted to become a superhero. However, in Hotline Miami, it seems that the big operation is being ran on animal masks from a Halloween store. Kinda similar, but not too similar like the other similarities. During the marketing, the game was picked up by Devolver Digital, an indie publisher company which wasn't very well known at the time. They paid for all the promotion of the game for a cut of the profits from the game. The cover art for the game was painted by Swedish painter named Nicholas Ackerblad, aka El Huarvo, and from interviews what we've learned is that he actually loved the Hotline Miami project. Okay, so I done a little bit more research and I found an old blog post that's kind of dead at the moment, but it had a bunch of cards basically explaining all the cameos in the game. So there's actually more than one cameo besides Beard. But I had to include the Beard one considering he plays such an important part of the story. But as you play the game, you might notice all the other cameos in the background, preferably when Jacket's going around in the transitions between the stages. One of the more famous pieces of marketing material made for the game was the voicemail trailer, which was made using voice messages from Florida fans who called about a hotline that Devolver had set up.
Playing Hotline Miami has made me hate every game that isn't Hotline Miami.
I really like having fun and also not having fun. This game does a good job of allowing me to both have fun and not have fun.
Alright, I've talked a bit too long about inspirations, marketing, and the history. Now we gotta actually talk about the game. The game begins with Jacket walking into a room with 3 people in chairs staring at him. The 3 people include Jacket himself in a chicken mask, a Russian mobster in an owl mask, and finally, a woman in a donkey mask. The owl treats Jacket with hostility upon entering, demanding to know who he is, while the donkey cares more concern for who he is and his past. Meanwhile, the Jacket in front of him, whose real name is Richard, is the only one who knows who he is, and tries to help him recollect his memories by remembering dates for him. You don't remember me? I'll give you a clue. Does April the 3rd mean anything to you? I believe that was the day of our first encounter. You look like you might be remembering something. The game begins with Jacket waking up from his bed after a phone call starts ringing from him in the sitting room. The caller claims to be Tim from his bakery, and he mentions how his delivery should have been complete, and to read the instructions very carefully. While at first this might seem just a simple delivery for the outsider or whoever's listening in on the phone calls, the message itself usually contains an address, which is actually directions for where Jacket should be going to clear the latest mafia hideout. And now, the game really begins. You start off every level by picking a mask that usually has some kind of bonuses. As you can see here, look further and start with a knife. That's personally my favorite. Then begins the core gameplay loop. Kill enemies, die, retry. Over and over and over again. This is the endless loop that keeps the game going. Some levels are harder than others with bullshit off-screen enemies, but this is the most basic level that basically shows the core Hotline Miami loop. You can see me there throwing shit to knock enemies to the ground to finish them off, of course, before I myself get killed, but that's the point. You're supposed to keep trying over and over and over again until you get it just right, and the music that goes along with it really keeps you going. It's probably the main reason why I didn't quit after, like, going halfway through the game. And finally, when you see the final enemy in front of you knocked down to the ground as you go in for the final kill and you crush their skull. When the level is complete, the music stops, and a hangover ambient soundtrack is played instead, Crush by El Javier. There's a lot of theories as to why the music suddenly stops. A lot of people just simply says, well, the combat's over, there's no need for the music anymore. Well, there's a lot of theories that it's actually supposed to make the player think about the actions they've just committed. After all, as you're walking through the hallways, the blood and the gore never goes away. This is something important that is discussed later on in the series. Hotline Miami has always had the themes of anti-violence, with Jacket constantly asking the player do they enjoy hurting people. Now, a lot of people assume that whenever Richard's talking, it's always to Jacket, but in reality, he's actually been talking to the player the entire time. Is the bone-crushing difficulty, it's trying to encourage you to stop playing. Kinda like how in Dark Souls, its extreme difficulty to most people would usually discourage them from keeping on playing. That's the whole point. You keep going no matter what, and you get overwhelmed with joy when you finally defeat the boss, and all of a sudden, you want to keep pushing forward. However, Hotline Miami this entire time has been trying to get you to do the opposite. It's been trying to get you to quit. And before we continue, I need to add a disclaimer. I won't be talking about every single level on this list because they're relatively the same in terms of combat and styles. Pretty much just all that gets added is more weapons and ways to kill enemies with a few significant moments. But any level that's just unnecessary to the plot, I'll just be leaving out. Here's a tier list of all the levels, which I think are good and bad. And let's get back to it. At the end of every single level, Jacket is seen going to some place before immediately heading home. The following places include a VHS store, a pizza parlor, a bar, and a convenience store, all of which are ran by a guy named Beard, a man with long hair and a big beard who was actually modeled after El Huavo. He kinda serves as that bridge in between that explains some of the story, more of the public's eye, paying attention more and more to Jacket's actions. At first, he'll be comforting him, ask him if he's okay, and then he will be talking about all the instances. Although there are some moments where he kinda breaks the fourth wall, but we won't talk about that right now. All that's important is that you need to know that Beard's important. After 2 more missions, Jacket receives another message, this time from someone named Kate with the Hotline Miami dating services. Kate tells Jacket that their date is waiting and to come well dressed. Jacket is tasked with infiltrating a movie producer's home, clearing the building the same way as he does before. However, after clearing both floors, Jacket will come back down to the first floor to return to his car, only for the movie producer to come out and try and attack him. This results in a sort of boss fight kind of scenario. All you need to know is if you just load 3 shotgun shells into him, he instantly falls to the ground. After that, Jack finishes him off, and before he leaves, he finds a girl inside the movie producer's room. Judging by the cameras, I'm not going to explain what exactly happened here, but she basically asks Jacket to kill her. Instead, Jacket picks her up and brings her to his car. After this, we once again enter another dream sequence. It's the same room as before, with the same 3 masks talking to us, albeit the room is in a different state. It's a lot more dirtier, you can see plants being thrown onto the ground, the dirt and the particles have increased a little slightly. In this scene, all the masks are berating Jacket once again. They're condemning his actions for killing people, while the donkey tries to figure out what's going on story-wise. Now that Richard knows that we know who he is and he knows who we are, he then gives us 4 questions to ask ourselves. One of which is the infamous, "Do you like hurting people?" question. After asking us the 4 questions, he basically tells us to fuck off, and that's the end of the dream sequence. After this, we go through a level which isn't too important to the plot, so we're gonna skip it. We actually go immediately onto one that's important much more later on. Now bear in mind, there's never been civilians in Hotline Miami. Pretty much from this point, it's just been hostiles and the guys you meet along the way. But this time during the mission, there are people there who are genuinely not trying to hurt you. However, you have to kill them or else you can't proceed on to the level. It's explained later on who these people are, and we're just gonna leave it at that for a bit. Oh, there's also these 2 janitors. Those 2 are also important. Just keep them in your mind. Oh, by the way, Jacket's an unreliable narrator. And in case you don't know what that means, it basically means the main protagonist, his story that he's telling, might not be the full story. It's explained a little bit later why he's an unreliable narrator, but just for the sake of avoiding spoilers too soon, let's just say he's unreliable. The 7th chapter begins, and all is pretty much normal. Jacket is tasked with clearing an entire building filled with Russian mobsters. However, when he is on the top floor and clears out the last enemy, as he walks out, the phone begins to ring. When he goes over to pick up the phone, it turns out to be the same organization that's been calling him, telling him there's been a change of plans. Someone at the phone call center is threatening the organization, and Jacket's responsible with dealing with him. After leaving and getting into his car and heading to the phone call center, Jacket walks through hallways filled with bodies of what appears to be people who just simply worked at the center, with a guy in a biker helmet inside the main office. Upon walking in, the biker doesn't even bother to negotiate with him. He just simply tells him that he's dead meat and the fight begins. This is actually one of the very few moments in Hotline Miami where we get a semi-boss fight sort of thing. After some back and forth, eventually Jacket successfully takes him down. His last words being, "This can't be happening. It can't end like this. Not like this. I'm so close." And with one final swing, Jacket successfully recreates Last of Us Part 2 and finishes off Biker, to which he leaves the phone call center completely unscathed. After driving home, Jacket enters once again another dream sequence. If I'm correct, this is the second last one. Once again, we are introduced by the donkey, the owl, and Richard himself standing at the very end. Nothing really too important happens here besides basically connecting the bridge between chapter 2 and 3. In this part, Richard leaves Jacket with 3 predictions. Someone you know is not who you think he is. Someone will soon be taken from you. On July the 21st, you will awaken a bigger house. After some very not subtle foreshadowing, Jacket once again wakes up in his apartment. He leaves to clear out another Russian hideout, this time inside of a nightclub. This level isn't too important besides a quick reference to the Hotline Miami comic, but what actually makes this mission a lot more important is on Jacket's way home when he goes to the same convenience store, Beard starts telling him that there's something important Jacket should know, that none of what he's seeing is actually real. He uses Biker's still alive corpse at the corner of the room as an example. Jacket of course doesn't believe this, but Beard decides as another example of nothing being real, he temporarily makes the screen go static and Biker's corpse is all of a sudden gone, and you can see in the bathroom a man washing his hand. Beard of course returns to his normal state, basically using the same dialogue as before. Jacket then returns to his car and the game proceeds as normal. After another mission, something different happens this time. Instead of the game ending when all the enemies are eliminated, the SWAT team actually busts in before the final enemy is killed and nearly kills Jacket. You actually can't kill these guys, no matter how hard you try. The most you can do is knock them down with a melee attack. After that near-death experience, Jacket leaves and decides to go home. During his little trip to go to the pizza parlor, which is one of the levels you can go in between, Jacket finds Beard dead on the ground behind the counter, with the guy who was washing his hands from the previous level transition taking over his position. Unlike Beard, he basically tells Jacket that they're closing up early and to leave. After the next mission, you see Jacket walk to the bar he used to frequent. This was another transition area, and you can see it actually get worse over time. Once again, we see Richter take over the place of Beard in the bar and tells Jacket basically to go home again, with the dead Russian mafia member that you can see at the table actually start to speak to Jacket despite having a giant gaping hole in his head. Now you remember all those dream transitions? Well, each of them started at the very start of every chapter inside the game, or I guess they're called parts. However, this time, the part starts with Jacket going into his apartment and going downstairs, where he finds his girlfriend unfortunately dead on the ground, having a hole inside of her chest and neck. He walks over to the couch where the man in the green outfit from all of the previous level transitions is actually there waiting for him. The fact that he's wearing an animal mask is actually a great hint that he may be part of the same organization that Jacket is in, and it's revealed later on that it is indeed confirmed. And after finally telling Jacket that he's pretty much done waiting, Richter shoots Jacket in the neck, meeting the same fate as his girlfriend. For the most part. You see, this whole thing has actually just been a dream sequence. Not just this section, this intro, the whole game has basically been one big coma dream that Jacket has been a part of. Now I did leave some important pieces of evidence for the sake of time, but during those transition areas in between levels, there's actually a lot of moments where Jacket's talking to dead bodies of Russian mafia members he's killed. So there is evidence to actually build up to this, and it's not just basically an English essay where the child has to write a goddamn story and it ends with "it's all just a dream." There is actual evidence towards this. I just had to leave it out for time. Richard then starts to tell Jacket that it's basically all of his fault, and he should probably just go to bed, as there's a warm bed waiting for him at the end of the hall. Jacket leaves, and as he's leaving, his clothes change into hospital gown. He walks out to the door to see his own body on top of a hospital bed, in which his head explodes. The next section begins with Jacket waking up inside of a hospital room, with a surgeon and a police officer in the room talking over him, presumably thinking he's asleep. The police officer goes on about how he's a prime suspect in a murder case, and that he needs to take him to the station for questioning. However, the doctor is stating that he needs to be prepped for surgery, so as of right now, he's staying. Jacket wakes up and climbs through the window in order to slide his way to another room. This is actually one of the few missions in Hotline Miami where you don't need to kill anyone, because Jacket, of course, still having his head concussion, as you can see by the screen going wider and wider the more you move. Jacket can't actually hit anyone. A lot of people consider this the lowest point in the game, but personally, the sudden abrupt change of gameplay is definitely absurd for a lot of people. But personally, I think it's a great addition to the game's story, and it works very well. The only real big problem I have with it is that my guess is that the enemy's cone of vision is the exact same on the doctors, because they spot you instantly even if you're behind some walls. That's really the only big complaint I have about this mission, is that the AI sometimes sees you way too quickly than it really should be. But pretty much once you complete this, you don't need to worry about the stealth sections ever again. After successfully escaping from the hospital, Jacket leaves and heads back to his home. After returning home, Jacket comes back to see that his car is completely totaled, having been graffitied as well as the windows smashed in. He heads downstairs to see the police tape on his front door. After tearing it down and searching through the trash bin, he sees his old clothes, as well as the chalk marks of his dead girlfriend. After getting his clothes, he heads back to his car and begins to get back to work. Well, work is the wrong word. You see, Jacket's now out for revenge, and his first target is the police station. The reason he's coming here is because he overheard the police officer talk about the witness that was also there, the guy who is being accused of being the murderer. This, of course, being Richter. So Jacket's idea is to go to the police station and deal with Richter himself before the police do. After dealing with 2 floors worth of enemies, including a new detective type enemy, which is basically the tank enemy, Jacket comes to a room to a semi-boss fight sort of scenario, where the warden has basically enclosed himself in the middle of the room with 4 security guards ready to shoot on sight. Now, he's actually not too hard. Basically, you just have to blindly fire into the open areas, and you should get everyone. Upon finishing all the enemies on this floor, Jacket goes to the holding cell after retrieving the keys. Richter is of course shocked by Jacket's appearance, not only getting through the entire police station, but also miraculously being alive. He then begins to state Jacket should probably just leave because there is nothing for him. After Jacket punches Richter, he begins to start telling Jacket that he too has been getting the phone calls, and that the closest lead he's gotten to getting them to stop is on the evidence table room. Now, it's completely up to the player, but you can actually choose to kill Richter or let him live. Now, unfortunately, canonically, he actually has to live in order for the sequel. But it's fine, he gets his own arc and kind of redemption story in that. After making your choice, Jacket leaves to his car and heads back home. Now, the next mission isn't really too necessary. I'd debate that it's actually filler, but the address itself is actually to a mafia hideout. Inside the mafia hideout is a leader who knows the location of the mafia boss. Jacket heads there. After interrogating him, Jacket discovers the location of the mafia boss's hideout and goes there, and thus begins the final level. Upon reaching the house, Jacket immediately knocks down the first enemy and kills the 2 guards. This actually is perfectly crafted in a way so Jacket cannot enter the boss fight with any other weapons. The Mafia leader then starts talking to Jacket, basically saying, "Oh, you basically fucked up gambling here, mate." After that, he sends his 2 Panthers to attack you. One of them tries coming at you first, with the other one being delayed, allowing you to successfully take each one out. After using a trophy to finish them off, his bodyguard actually starts attacking you, and upon taking her out, the Mafia boss himself begins his own attack, which is basically just unloading dual SMGs into you. After a while, he'll begin to reload, and during his reload phase, you want to use one of the knives on the bodyguard on him. After doing it twice, then ends the boss fight. To avoid giving you the satisfaction, the Mafia boss shoots himself, but before Jacket leaves, the phone on his table begins to ring. It appears to be an old man basically screaming that he can't get some goddamn sleep. Jacket picks up the pistol that the boss used to kill himself and heads upstairs. Upon walking in, he sees an old man on a wheelchair, basically commending you for causing all the ruckus. But then he realizes that you're not here under normal circumstances. You're here to kill the Mafia boss leader. He admits to his many crimes. Jacket shoots him in the head, takes off his mask, lights a cigarette, then he holds a photo and throws it off the balcony. And finally, the credits begin to roll. And thus concludes Hotline Miami 1. At least that's what you thought it would end like. But we've got another 3 levels to do, baby! Part 5 begins with a time jump and Biker shaking the shit out of a man in a pig mask, stating that he's fucking bored of the job that the pig mask has gotten him in, and he wants out. The man in the pig mask falls to the floor with his mask slipping off, and he says that he'll get in a lot of trouble if he tells you. But he tells him anyway that there's a guy at a restaurant called the Blue Dragon that can help him get out. It's a tiny Chinese restaurant. And he begs Biker not to say anything of his name. Then, Biker leaves and jumps on his motorbike. The unique thing about Biker compared to Jacket is that unlike Jacket, who can pick up many weapons, Biker is restricted to a cleaver and 3 throwing knives. But in all honesty, the levels are designed in such a way where that shouldn't be too much of an issue. At the end of the level, he runs over to the man in the Chinese restaurant and begins shaking him, demanding to know who's leaving all the voice messages on his phone. He says he has no idea who is calling the shots, however you should go to Phone Hum and figure out who it is from there. Biker leaves on his motorbike and heads back home, much similar to how Jacket's levels usually end with him heading back home. However, when he gets on the phone, he discovers that the voice messages are getting a little bit more threatening and he's running out of time. So he decides to complete at least one more of their jobs to keep them off his trail. The level after that is pretty much just him clearing an entire arcade filled with Russian Mafia members. After heading back and the level transition completes, he heads to the phone and he gets another voicemail telling him that someone wants to go on a date with him. However, he chooses to ignore this and head straight to Phone Hum, which he was told to go at the Blue Dragon. After basically killing absolutely no one, seeing as they all completely back away, he heads to the office where the boss basically demands security. He finishes him off, basically being the only kill that he does throughout this entire level, and then he begins scanning through the computers. Upon going through the computer, he finds the location where all the calls coming from. And then Jacket walks in. Basically, Biker warns him this time, and instantly kills Jacket. Okay, so if you're confused, that is completely normal. You probably wouldn't get this on your first go. But you remember how I had to say before that Jacket was an unreliable narrator? Well, this plays into the plot. Basically, what Jacket thought he'd done is he went into Phone Hum and he killed Biker, and then basically the mission was complete. However, in Biker's own memory, which he is also unreliable, considering in the level transition, before he actually heads to Phone Hum, you can see that he has had a party at his apartment. So what does that mean? Well, in reality, neither of them died at Phone Hum. Both of them survived the attacks, leading to Jacket basically getting hitmaned by Richard because he technically left a witness, and Biker to discover the truth about what's really going on. After that near-death experience, Biker wakes up and he answers the voicemail once again. This time, the person on the phone has stated that he has a tombstone made for him. This is obviously a threat for basically not leaving the 50 Blessings alone. Oh, by the way, the 50 Blessings is the name of the organization that's doing all this. He ignores this and heads straight for the location he had just found. Upon entering, he sees the janitor from one of the earlier Hotline Miami levels standing there, and when he sees Biker, he immediately runs to the sewer at the end. Now, here's where the game breaks off into two paths. There was two endings to this game. One is the ambiguous ending, and the other one is a more straightforward ending. I'm just gonna skip over the basic ending because it's very disappointing, it's not worth it. So I'll just show you what happens in the secret ending. Oh, by the way, to get the secret ending, there's basically a bunch of puzzle pieces on the ground inside all of the levels. They kind of carry over as you go through, and then in the pause menu, you solve the puzzle, which the word is, I was born in the USA. It's pretty simple. Pretty much once you've done that, you can start the secret ending, which is when you interact with the computer right before heading into the sewers in the final mission. So, just letting you know in case you decide to play. After discovering the secrets of the 50 Blessings, he heads downstairs to basically confront them. They start bragging about how, oh, you can't get past our computer, how the hell would you know? In which he literally states the password, and they have not a clue how the fuck he found the password. Alright, time for a Hideo Kojima lore dump. So, basically, the 50 Blessings are a group of patriots who believe the United States has fallen and becoming weak thanks to the Russo-American War. The Russo-American War was basically where America and Russia fought against each other, and they signed a pact called the Russo-American Agreement. At least I think that's what it's called. Basically, the agreement is, listen, if we keep fighting anymore, we're gonna end up throwing nukes at each other, so let's end it here. And the 50 Blessings plan is to basically start literal hate crimes enough to the point where Americans start fighting Russian people to the point where they have to start the war again. It is explained so much in all the scrap notes you can find along the game, as well as in Hotline Miami 2, but I am just not going to explain it because it gets really fucking complicated. Basically, all you need to know, 50 Blessings want to start World War III, and they do that by getting patriots to kill Russian people. Basically, the situation Jacket and Biker are in. So, it's entirely your choice what you want to do from here. You can either kill them, or you can let them live. Now, the sanest choice would probably just to kill them and have this whole operation over with, although to be fair, it's probably too late considering all the damage is already done. And then Biker hops on his bike one last time, and the actual credits start rolling. For real this time. Oh yeah, by the way, you remember that mission before where Jacket had to actually kill innocent civilians? Well, they weren't civilians, they were politicians. That was actually one of the big plans of the 50 Blessings. And the reason Biker all of a sudden wants to leave is because he was the original person who was going to go through with that mission. Again, explained in scraps! And thus, that concludes Hotline Miami 1. Now, why was this game so important? Well, after the release of the game, it shot Devolver Digital, remember those guys? Publishers of the game? Yeah, it shot them into the goddamn stratosphere. All of a sudden, they were getting deals from indie developers left and right. And to be fair, a lot of those indie games are really damn good, including Enter the Gungeon, Cult of the Lamb, and every 12-year-old's favorite game for about 5 seconds when it became free on the PlayStation, Fall Guys. Now, besides actual success, it basically popularized a genre called Vaporwave, which the internet was pretty much not accustomed to at the time. With its music and its style and its aesthetic, pretty much the whole internet latched on and used it. And if you actually go to the community tab on Steam, you'll actually see there's pretty much a huge fan base, not only in this genre, but also the game itself. The game actually played a lot of heavy roles in some AAA games. One example I can give is Travis Strikes Again, which, according to the developer, he loved playing the Hotline Miami video games and wanted to throw a reference in it, his own game, somehow. And he done that by having literal arcade machines where you could talk to the actual characters from Hotline Miami. Another person, who you wouldn't expect to be such a huge fan, was Neil Druckmann. Last of Us, Neil Druckmann. Uncharted, Neil Druckmann. Yeah, he was a huge fan of Hotline Miami. So much so that he wanted to make games from those IPs. And it turns out, in The Last of Us Part 2, at a certain point in the game when you put your knife up to someone's throat, you can see them playing Hotline Miami on a PS Vita. So yeah, the game was popular. A lot of people were heavily influenced by it, as well as some other indie game developers, including some who have actually went on to develop games for Devolver Digital. So overall, Hotline Miami was not only a huge success for the developers, but also a huge success for the genre of vaporwave and indie games as a whole. Now, there is a lot of controversy for Hotline Miami 2. A lot of people say, oh, it's just a bunch of nonsense. But personally for me, I think it's pretty much misunderstood, but we are already way too off track, so I'm just gonna leave it at there. So thanks for watching, and I'm gonna go sleep now. Bye!